Pod SaaS, where we're putting the SaaS back in sassy. Sponsored by LeadrPro, where you can book demos with target customers on demand and fill your sales pipeline instantly.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Pod SaaS. I'm your host, Chris Sheng. Today we got Josh over from City Innovations, which is a venture studio. That's correct?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely.
Awesome. Cool. So tell us a little bit about what you guys do and kind of your, what led you to starting City Innovations and what kind of companies do you guys tend to work with?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know, and maybe real quick, just give us like a short kind of like blurb of what is a venture studio? Because I think like a lot of our listeners might be curious as to what that is.
Oh, absolutely. It's venture studio is kind of a new term in the industry, right? So I think everyone knows what venture capital is, right? Everyone's as a startup and a founder, you kind of want to get funded by venture capital. And so as a venture studio, it's imagine it, we have kind of a capital arm, but we also have an accelerator mixed with a product design studio. So the analogy I like to give people is if you're a car, we're kind of and your car needs work, you pull your car into the venture studio and we have the team. So we have people that have entrepreneurs within our organization, entrepreneurs in residence. We have designers, we have engineers. So we have a bunch of people that actually help build startups. And so we work with founders, and you can almost imagine us as a co-founder of working with founders, and to say, but we're as a co-founder, instead you have a team. So you don't just have one person, you actually have the experience of many people. So that's a little bit of what we do and what a venture studio is. So
cool. And what kind of companies do you guys work with? Is this something where you take, like a solo founder at the ideation phase, or are you working with, companies that have more market fit or in revenue? Working with a team of founders in that case?
Yeah.
What's the typical makeup, if there is any?
Yeah, we usually work with early stage. So it's usually in the 0 to 1 space, kind of pre-market fit, product market fit. We work with them to help find product market fit. And that's like really where our sweet spot is. We work with seed funded entrepreneurs mainly. So, typically they come to us when they have seed funding, whether that's family, friends, fools, or some kind of investor, right? So they come to us then. We also work with corporate innovation arms of larger firms. We have actually some partnerships with several larger corporate entities that you would know in the marketplace, that what their job is they have a lot of ideas and they have funding, but they don't have kind of that validation experience of how do you run lean startup experiments and market experiments to find product market fit. Like, how do you end up going about doing that process? And so our team has a lot of experience in finding product market fit and what experiments to run and what are the most important assumptions to validate and invalidate quickly. So
interesting. Very cool. Awesome. Sounds good. So before we jump into kind of how you ended up starting and being a part of City Innovations, love to get to know you a little bit more personally. We have a series of just rapid fire questions. I can just fire away. Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Favorite entrepreneur or startup story? It could be one of the same or it could be different.
Yeah, I think if I were to go with my favorite startup story, it would definitely be, I love the startup stories that start in a completely different spot. And so for me, it would be like Instagram is a great example. It's like they started as actually an app called Bourbon, trying to find like their favorite bourbon in the area. And then they realized after looking at the data how well used the photo feature was, and pivoted completely to just a completely 180 different direction of photos. And it's a really cool, those are the kinds of stories that you're like, gives you hope, when you're trying to do things, you're like, oh my gosh, like even if we go down the wrong path, there's still the ability to pivot. And they did a great job of pivoting.
Yep.
So.
Very cool. Love that. What did you want to be as a kid? Do you remember thinking back to like 8, 9, 10 years old?
Yes. Oh man, I know exactly. I wanted to be an astronaut. I knew right away. I was like, that's what I'm going to be. And as you all hear now, I'm definitely not that. So, but it was, that's definitely what I wanted. What's beyond the horizon, which is still kind of a theme. So.
Yep, for sure. Did you ever get into like, I don't know, the like kind of like the astronaut ice or the space ice cream kind of stuff, or like the foods that they would eat on the on the
Like the
shuttles.
ones in packets and stuff.
Yeah. I remember that was like a big thing as a kid because I remember wanting to be an astronaut. Those are like the things that you could get your hands on to have like that kind of experience.
Yes. You know what I didn't, but I am a Star Wars guy, like through
Okay,
and through. Some people are Trekkies. I'm just a Star Wars guy. I just love space. So,
got it. Cool. Next question is most painful experience, and I'll give it a little bit of context. I think most of our personal or professional like growth, exponential growth, typically stems from places of extreme discomfort. So, is there anything that you can recall? Again, it could be personal or professional, where obviously going through it at the time was super horrific or very difficult, but looking back at it now, you can say that was a character-defining experience.
oh, 100%. Yeah, I remember this very distinct moment. And what I tell people is entrepreneurship is kind of like an iceberg, right? So I think everyone views entrepreneurship as has this really cast this light of like you own your own business. Whether you're successful or not, they see the tip of the iceberg. Underneath is what you're talking about, right? Like underneath all these, the water line is all these just stories of war torn bruises and scars. And there's been experiences in my life. I think one of them I'd be happy to share is where, I'm in the middle of kind of this big pivot and we're at the end of, came from Silicon Valley, background there as a startup there, and we did not find traction. And the money in the bank account was just going down every single month. And I'm taking personal pay cuts one after another. I'm leveraged beyond belief. I'm using credit cards to pay for things. And to the moment of all of a sudden in the middle of winter, my heater goes out and I have no money to pay for the heater, right? Of like to heat my house. And so I'm sitting here going, what in the heck am I going to do? Right. And so it was one of those amazing stories that I can't explain to this day because, I just sat there and I just kind of got on my knees and I'm just like, all right, I'm at the end of my rope. I don't know what to do. Woke up the next morning and in my mailbox is $5,000 with a note. I hope this is helpful. Literally, that's it, which is just the most bizarre turn of events that anyone could ever. I didn't even know that would happen, but it's one of those things and what that taught me, which is just so ironic, is like to have faith that things are going to turn around and get better. And so to have a community around you. Only a couple people knew, and I still don't know to this day of like who did that. And why they did that. But those are the stories that not very many entrepreneurs share of like over leveraged just to the max, stress, unbelief, and just, now it's a completely different ball game. But I mean, you've been there, and as entrepreneurs, we've all been there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, I think, and this is one of the things I want to shed light on through this podcast has been that we've heard a lot of different stories. We've had founders that, mortgage their house for a second time, kind of things like that. And I think people know that, well, some people, some of these founders can go back. Like if they have an engineering background, they can always go back to something more secure, but there's also some of those that don't have that background. And it's like, this is kind of it, right? It's like, got to figure this thing out. And I think that statistically speaking, when you look at, the success of businesses that, start off, raise venture capital of any sort, it's like less than 5%. And then to like live past 3 years, it's even like a smaller percentile. You're whittling, right, over the time period. And I think like, it's like anything else. And I think, it's more glamorized, I think, in the entertainment industry of like realizing that there's like the 10-year overnight success. But it's the same thing, I think, with entrepreneurship and almost pretty much anything else that you're going to do that you can see exponential return on, right? It's going to be like that 10-year of gritting it out, grinding it out, day in, day out, and some of those war-torn stories that you're talking about where you got some of those bumps and bruises along the way. Yeah.
That's 100% accurate. I mean, in my background and as an entrepreneur, I think this is not an uncommon story of in order to get to a success, there has to be at least, that the statistic is 9 out of 10 startups fail. Yeah. Right. And so there, in my background growing up, I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family and we went through 9 startups and 8 of them failed, so it was very painful to see the failure after failure but every failure, I think per your point, you learn something and you can apply it to the next one. And it also gives you the endurance, the kind of the perseverance to keep going, because you're like, well, what's the worst that can happen now?
Yeah.
And you just keep going and you keep driving.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think the I mean, you're speaking my language, but like pain tolerance is it's like a muscle, right? Like I feel like you can callous over it and you then are at the next level of pain that you can deal with, and the next level. And I think that's what's ultimately over time separates successful founders from everybody else, and everybody else from being a successful founder ultimately, right? So this leads to my next question, which is then what motivates you in the 25th hour? So when your back is stacked against the wall, what's pushing you forward?
yeah, no, that's a good question. I think for me, what motivates me would be the word I used before, which is faith. And
Yeah.
for me, it's kind of like a faith in something, and bigger than myself, that it's going to work, and that it's going to succeed. And that endurance of, I think that's the word that keeps coming back to me, is in that 25th hour, it's kind of just faith. It's like, I know, and I'm the kind of person that I know that I can't do it by myself, and I have to have people around me to help me. And entrepreneurship is extremely lonely, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that leadership in general is extremely lonely. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things. And yeah, you're nodding your head, as you're starting these things, it's like the stressors, people don't recognize all the stress that's involved with this stuff. They just glamorize it. And so that's that's the stuff, that's the moments that faith and that community really carries you through that 25th hour of, like, you've got
Mm.
people around you that you can count on.
Yeah, absolutely. I nod my head because I think like again, doing a number of these, I remember the lonely part resonates a lot with, I think a lot of the CEOs, founders, especially at the later stage companies where they now have a board. They've gone through with the sexy part of like raising Series A, B, C, whatever it might be at that point, right? But we've had founders and CEOs of unicorns on here that ultimately is like, it's the loneliest place to be, because now you have to have the utmost confidence leading a team of people while you still don't necessarily have autonomy, because now you have to answer to a board, and they're just making demands of what you need to do, and you're kind of like this in the middle of these two worlds where extreme confidence but have to deliver, and you're trying to manage the both of them. And I don't think necessarily a lot of founders, like, earlier stage founders, you know what your milestones are immediately, and then kind of like and I think we've been battling this too, or I have, where it's kind of like at a certain point, how much, talking to founders who have exited before, have done it multiple times, you start trying to understand what's the priority here. Like what's the end game, and what is your own personal goal that you want, and you got to backwards engineer from that. Because if your goal is just to build like $1 billion company, chances are slim to none. It's a great aspiration, but then also, in his particular case, this guy that is a mentor to me, one of his first exits was $1 billion plus company, but he had less than 1% ownership of it by the end of the day. And his most recent outcome, was his largest financial outcome by any means, and he is the only signature required to sell the company to Gusto. And it made things just so different, and he was looking at it very differently at that point, and he did it in 18 months. So I think that's something a lot of founders definitely should think about as they go out and venture on this journey.
100%. And I would say one more thing I would say too is, one of the things that one of the coaches in my life has said, which has just resonated with me, when your back is against the wall and you're in the 25th hour, is asking yourself, what's the next right best thing? It's like not getting overwhelmed with, where you're going to be in 10 years. And you have to, like you said, I think that's so important, is you start with the end in mind and you work backwards. But when you're in the 25th hour and everything is going wrong, or everything, is like very stressful, what's the next right thing? And sometimes that's even a hard thing to do, So it's like, for me, it's kind of even saying, having the integrity to say, what's the next right thing? And then just doing that. And then just kind of having that muscle memory to do it over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, for sure. Um, this is something that a lot of founders I think struggle with, but it's the idea of what do you do to decompress? And is there anything personally that you do? Because I do think like, taking that time for yourself it may seem like counterintuitive because you're not being absolutely productive in that moment, but it does allow yourself to have the clarity, I think, come back and problem solve a lot more efficiently.
Yes. For me, I definitely do. There's two things that I do. One is I run, and I love
Mm-hmm.
to run. So for me, it's just being able to just clear my mind and be able to just focus on something else. And so I think that even relates to the second thing, which is um, I actually live where I am is I'm actually in the country. I have chickens, I have animals, I have
Awesome.
6 acres. I've got, so for me, it's my job is a high tech job, right? So I'm connected to the internet, have high speed internet, still connected, still doing things in the city a lot. But for me, doing something completely opposite from like my day to day of literally stupid things like mowing the lawn or feeding the animals or taking care of something else, like sometimes it just puts it in perspective, right? It's just kind of like it helps you decompress and helps you think about things that are just more important. I've got 3 kids. My kids just love living in the country, and so it allows me just to focus on more important things in life of like my kids. That's just like it puts that in perspective to be like, okay, this too shall pass if I'm in the 25th hour, and it helps me decompress. So those are a couple things that help. So
Awesome. Cool. I love that. Next question is, as a founder, you tend to wear a lot of different hats, right? And you'll pick up skill sets along the way that you never thought you'd imagine you would be doing. Has there been anything that you've picked up along the way that you've had a strong emotional disposition towards, either loved or hated?
loved or hate it. I think I've had to get better at over the years of and realizing the importance. And I think a lot of founders are this way is they have this very clear vision in their head of where they want to go and what they want to change in the world, right? So and they go after it. Now, the thing that I think a lot of founders, especially first time founders, and I would say I've had to learn through pain this process. The analogy that's been given to me is I'm the kind of guy that runs over the mountain and then you leave team in the dust, and you're like, let's go over here. And the importance of buy-in and bringing the team through the journey, right, along with you. And even from an investor standpoint, bringing the investors to realize the same vision and be the alignment, the importance of alignment, the importance of team, of having everyone on the same page. So it's like, as a founder, you just want to run and you want to run fast, and having that importance of there's a vast importance of making sure we're together in this. It's not just me. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that, well, when you're a founder and you start something, a lot of times it's just you. And then you add a co-founder, and then you add other developers, and you add other people on the team, and your team starts to grow and grow and grow. And you realize the skills that got me from like when I first started, which is like the grind and like the passion and all of that, I now have to retool my skill set to be more of what the business needs. And so that's an interesting, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs probably would resonate with me on that journey of like, you then have to develop as a founder to be what the business needs to be in different places the business goes, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. At different stages, you're required to utilize different skill sets.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yep. And I think at the later stages, a lot of it's like almost like therapist. I mean, when you're managing large teams of people, you're basically trying to instill culture. Again, some of the companies that we've had on here where, now into the thousands of headcount, like that's their biggest hurdle, is to how to get buy-in from the whole team.
Yes.
Very cool. One of the other questions here is, do you have a bucket list, number one? And then number two, what's one of the more ambitious items on that bucket list?
I have a couple items on the bucket list, and I've been able to do a couple of them. Like one of them at one point was to run a marathon. I've run a couple marathons, so I've kind of checked those off. But now I want to run more marathons, and I think one of them is, like I said, I like to run. So along that same vein, it's like I want to run an Ironman, and it's like that just takes a lot of time and energy to devote to that kind of thing, which I haven't yet gone over the hump of devoting to that. But so, and I mean, I think I also like to travel. So I think there's a couple bucket items on that. And COVID really threw a wrench in that to think through of like, okay, well, how is this going to happen? So, another item on the bucket list was, like I said, I had 3 kids and I'm married. And so we actually in the last year just settled down 6 months ago from traveling the country. We actually just sold everything. And then we actually went and got in a 43-foot RV and just traveled the whole country. And I had high-speed internet the whole time in there. Thank goodness for things like Starlink, to keep me connected. But those are the, I think people know me as if I want to do something, I just kind of leap, and that's good and bad. It's like I just go at it with everything. So I don't necessarily have a whole lot of other things on my list. I mean, there's other things I want to accomplish from a business perspective, but not necessarily as they come up. Oh, that's cool. I want to try that. I want to live on a farm. I want to have chickens. and I'll end up doing that. So there is a very loose bucket list, I'll say.
Yeah.
So
fair enough. I love that.
Yeah.
Last question here is the idea of legacy. More importantly, like the impact that you want to leave on this earth before you leave it.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. I think for me, so one of the vision and the mission of City Innovations is 9 out of 10 startups fail. And so how do we flip that script? And so I think if I could cast a vision of that, I would love it if I could be, and our team could help be responsible for all those good startups that have they want to solve amazing problems, and that most of them die. And so, but what would happen if you could be a part of that, in which most startups didn't fail and 9 out of 10 succeeded? That's a pretty big vision. And so if you could do that, what kind of world would it be? Right. And so like for me, that's a pretty huge thing. If you could change the world and work with startups that change the world, not just startups that want to make money, like that change the world. And if you could make 9 out of 10 succeed, what kind of world would we be in? And that's kind of a driver for me of changing the world in a positive way, leaving the world in a better spot than when I arrived.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Yeah, I mean, you got my wheels turning on that too. I mean, I think like when you say something like that to flip the script on it, I almost feel like you have to put founders through like a physical boot camp where they got to go through that pain that you've gone through already emotionally, financially, that hardship without almost like literally doing it. But I think that's like, those are the exercises that it's like, weeding out everybody else, right? I think like,
yes,
even I worked in entertainment for a number of years, and I think there's a lot of like actual metaphors that translate over. But I mean, I think even from an actor's perspective, it's like, unless you lived some life, it doesn't matter how passionate you are about that skill set or trying to become that, like you need to have things to draw upon.
That's right.
You need to have those real life experiences. And I think the entrepreneurship is no different. Like I think a lot of times the most creative problem solving that I've ever came up with that ended up like being the key that unlocks something has been like when the back's against the wall, 25th hour, and you're like, crap, I got to figure this out. Otherwise, like, we might have to let some people go, or like, when those kinds of situations arise. So yeah, I mean, I'd love to see how you're going to try to conquer that, because to me, that's definitely like, it's a big problem, and it's one where it's like almost you have to either you have to vet those that have gone through something that knows what their purpose is and their why, or you got to help figure out how to instill that in them, because they have the other intangibles, right, that's involved in being a great founder. So cool.
That's right.
So that ends our series of rapid fire questions. Love a lot of the stuff that you're saying. I think it resonates a lot just with my personal philosophies. But I would want to know a little bit more, and I'm sure the audience wants to know a little bit more too about your background. Where did you start at? I saw you did some more corporate type jobs and originally, and you got your MBA and and then how did you end up in entrepreneurship? And then ultimately starting City Innovations. So as much as you want to share some light on that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. My background is an engineer at heart. So you talked about non-engineering co-founders and founders, and I am definitely an engineering founder. And through that, I think there's dangers of every engineering co-founder is we get stuck in this cycle of I want to go build something because I can, and it's like not because I should, because I can, so um, I think that, for my engineering background, it started really at age 14. And I think a lot of founders do like when they're techie and they start really young and they start creating things and they realize there's this terminology called God complex where it's as software you have this God complex where you can just create almost anything. And that's the power of software, right? And so for me, I had that at a really young age, in designing actually video games. It was like my parents' Atari. They had an Atari, really old school system, right? Asteroids, being able to see that I could actually like open it up in a text editor and then like manipulate numbers in there and see like asteroids get bigger and smaller. Like that was just an epiphany moment to me, like that simple thing. And that just kind of moved me forward in that area of I started going down this game development route, when games started to get more progressed of Windows 3.1 and Windows 95, and you had Doom and you had all these other games come out, and it was really exciting. And so I was pretty convinced I was going to go down this game design route, and that's what I wanted to do. And so as growing up, fast forward, I won't go through all my younger years, but I think I mentioned that there was a lot of my parents started a lot of entrepreneurial ventures. So that, ranging from a videography studio to a travel agency to fill in the blank. I mean, there was a vast amount of different experiences. And through that, I was able to kind of apply some of my engineering skills of building websites for people, right? Building different things. And, and you saw on my CV that I kind of moved to different corporate jobs. So I got hired pretty young as an engineer, to just start coding things. But what I quickly realized was that I was actually this weird engineer. And so I was weird because I always had these ideas and I wanted to create things and I wanted to create businesses. I didn't necessarily just want to focus on is the code beautiful and is it right? And should we, do unit testing? It's like, to me, I'm just like, well, let's move on to the next thing. Let's solve problems. I don't care about architecture is important, but I want to go solve other problems, So I started to realize that. And my career eventually ended up at KPMG as a director there, leading other teams, and then eventually a director of innovation there. And so I was, more of a consultant, right? And so my buddy called me up. He had moved over, his lifelong friend, moved over to Silicon Valley a year or two prior, called me up out of the blue, actually, at KPMG, and was like, hey, I went out to breakfast with this accredited investor. I had no idea they were accredited investor, right? One of these stories. And he's like, he wrote me a check pretty much at breakfast for $150,000. And I think you should leave your job and come work with me. And I was like, slow your roll. Hold on. That's pretty exciting. But I don't think I could leave this really cushy corporate job and help you with this, but I can help you in my spare time. So, helped him in his spare time. A couple months later, he calls me back up. He goes, all right, Josh, thought we're going to talk about the project. He's like, all right, how about over $1 million in seed funding? So he had raised over $1 million in seed funding, called me up and was convinced me to come out to Silicon Valley with him and really, build his startup. So I went out there as a kind of a 50%, co-founder, CTO, to help kind of build this product out. And what the premise of it is basically it was a fitness, digital fitness space. So the idea was, for those that are familiar with Peloton, imagine body weight exercises for, Peloton, but body weight exercises like yoga, push-ups, that sort of thing. So we wanted to do more of that. And at that time, there was nothing really in the marketplace like that. So it was very new, it was exciting. And so, as my background is engineering, this is where I was bringing back what I was saying about the danger of being a engineering co-founder. immediately my mind went to building, right? And it's like, oh, we gotta hire some people, like some developers. Partnered with this Israeli startup that really was focused on scaling out, live streaming. So we've partnered with them, hired an engineering team. We built out this whole platform. It took us about 6 months to build out this live streaming platform where you have an instructor, out in California, and I'm out in Michigan, and I can kind of just watch and participate. And so we were very excited because my co-founder was an influencer in the social media space, had over 1 million followers on Facebook. And so, at this point, it's like, okay, we've got kind of the following and we've got the tech, like marry them two together. This is like a match made in heaven, right? And so we're going through this process. And so we end up having a launch date. And so we set a launch date, we primed the pump, we got 50 trainers on the platform. They were all excited about it. We helped them advertise for their classes. We ended up getting 10,000 pre-signups for one of the classes, and we're like, this is going to be amazing. Like we're already like popping the champagne, right? Our investors are like very excited about it too. And so one of the things I think is important to note too is our vision for the company was the fact that 66% of gym memberships go unused, and we wanted to change that. And so like it was sickening to us that part of the model of a gym membership is the fact that they count on you not showing up. Right. And so we're like, we want to help people achieve their fitness goals. And so for us, we moved right into the solution, right, starting to build right away. And so when we launched and we got to this 10,000 pre-signups and the day was there of like, okay, there's going to be 10,000 people, I circled the wagons with the development team and I'm like, guys, with this amount of people, like I've seen systems crumble. We got to make sure scalability is good, right? We all got our computers out. We're making sure we're monitoring all the statistics of everything. And 10 people showed up, like 10, out of 10,000. And so we were like, oh my gosh, like there's something wrong, right? We blamed the development team and like, oh, there's something wrong. There's gotta be, so we're doing all these tests and everything. And no, it was like people could join. And so the day after, my partner and I just kind of looked at each other. We're like, what the heck happened? Right? Like what went wrong? So we got off the phone. We started calling the people that attended the class. And it's the standard type things that you get of, oh, I had to go walk my dog. Oh, my mom called, that was it. My mom called and I had to like go over to her house. It's all the fitness excuses. So then it was an epiphany moment of, oh my gosh, we built the wrong thing. Like we wanted to solve this 66% of gym memberships go unused, but we just built the same thing just virtually. And we're like, why did we do this? We assumed that the 66% of gym memberships go unused, that the problem was more of a convenience thing rather than like a accountability thing. Right. And so huge mistake. So we spent over, out of the $1 million, we spent $250,000 on building the wrong thing. Now, that was shocking to me, right? In that moment, I was like, oh my gosh, where do we go from here? Like, what did we do? So in that moment, we actually got introduced to some people from Google Ventures and YC when we were out in the Valley, and they talked about Lean Startup. And they were just like, you should read this book. And of course, being the cocky young person myself, oh, I've read that book. And it's like, no, I sure haven't. I didn't actually read the book. And so read the book and I was like, oh my gosh. And I just couldn't stop reading. I read Eric Ries. I read Steve Blank. I kept reading all these books and I'm just like, oh my gosh, we did everything wrong. Like everything we did wrong. And so we kind of took it back to the drawing board. And we ended up actually over the next 2 or 3 years, I'll fast forward time, we pivoted 7 to 8 different times. And where we ended up was a really interesting place. Was we ended up actually building a 5-on-5 fitness challenge. Like one of the experiments we wanted to run was we hypothesized that it's actually an accountability thing. And this is where we started to get massive traction. And what's fascinating to me is when we started doing this, we started really doing, if I rewound time before I read Lean Startup, I would have just built this thing. And I think that would have been completely the wrong way of doing it. And instead, I just hypothesized, and our team did. We said, well, what if we designed a fitness challenge that was 5-on-5, take 5 people, pit them against another 5 people? It was very simple. And then what we did was we would release 60-second challenges throughout the day, and they could get points for doing those challenges. And we basically gamified fitness, and they'd have to take pictures or video of them doing it and then posting it for social proof. Of course, there's still some, proof that, if they actually did exercises, we'd have to trust that. But we pitted these 2 teams up against each other, and the most amount of points won in a day would win the day. And the most amount of days won out of a week would win the challenge. Very, very simple. The challenge was just a week. And so we tested this over a week span, just did it over SMS. Literally, it was me staying up till midnight and a couple other team members adding up points and being the facilitator, right?
Yeah.
And so we're just facilitating these 2 teams, these points going across, people staying up till midnight doing freaking jumping jacks. It was crazy, right? And so what we realized at the end of the challenge was 90% participated. That's pretty good. That means 9 people out of the 10 that we put in there participated. And we're like, okay, well, and on average, 35 texts per day per person. We're like, that's actually pretty good engagement. We're like, so we said, well, that's just 10 people. Can we put more people through this? Like, let's just test this more. The next time we ran it another week. And this time, instead of 10 people through it, I took 2 groups, and out of our 5 people, we all ran 2 groups. So you've got, 10 times that by 5, 50 times that by 2, you've got 100 people running through this. And at the end of the week, same results. I think it was like 90% engagement, but it was like 30 texts per day. And we were like, oh my gosh, this is actually pretty engaging, like over 100 people. Let's keep doing this. So, and what's fascinating about this is running at Lean Startup, we were able to experiment hands-on because we didn't automate anything by saying, I wonder if we were to do things like, what if we were to add an element of crazy challenges? And we would do things like, hey, do 60 seconds of wind sprints, somewhere crazy. And literally we would get people like recording on their phones in like the airport. They would like be recording it, like going back and forth in the airport, these sprints. And we actually got on the local news in 2 different areas because they were like, yeah, people are just doing these crazy fitness challenges, people doing jumping jacks on cars and all sorts of crazy. We'd have to put disclaimers of like, hey, don't do it somewhere safe, like crazy, but safe. So after that, we started to realize we're hitting a scalability issue and we need to start scaling. And so that's when we started to think about, okay, well, we actually need to move this more towards a text-based solution. And so we, our automated text-based solution, like a bot or something like that. We looked at all the text options like Twilio and all these different options in the market. Too expensive for us to run it over text. It was like, holy crap, this is going to be kind of expensive. We had over 500 people on a weekly basis doing these challenges. So then what we ended up doing was we ended up automating it. And through actually going to Best Buy, getting Verizon phones, hacking the Verizon phones to automatically act as Twilio in between over a Verizon plan. And at the end of the month, basically we got a cease and desist letter from Verizon saying you have too many texts running through the system. It was like, I think it was 20,000 texts through the system. And so they were like, there's no way that a human is doing this, so got a cease and desist letter from Verizon. Someone on our board worked at Broadband, which, they basically do texting as well. And so we talked to them and we're like, hey, is there any way you can get us a discount on SMS texting? And so that's when we kind of moved everything. He's like, no, there's really no easy way of doing it. You got to go to an app. So we started moving towards an app. But, I'll now fast forward the story because here I wanted to kind of share this because our origin story is in Silicon Valley and all of this is like Lean Startup, like 101, right? It's this like, don't go build something. I made all the mistakes. Don't go build something and then, put all your chips on red and then waste $250,000. I've done that. Like, don't do that. Go build it right. Do it small. Do market testing. Start testing it with users, getting users, onboarding them. And so for us, we had noticed and figured all that out. And out of that experience, we realized, oh my gosh, like we got really good at running these experiments and got really formalized on running. Hey, we could, in a week or two, we actually created experiment templates. We had spreadsheets, we had Jira boards, we had it down pat to where we could run experiments very, very well and move very, very fast and learn very, very fast. And our investors saw this and they said, can you guys, I know this isn't what you guys, I know you're succeeding a lot in this startup. Can you come over here and help these other startups? And really that was the start of the journey of City Innovations. Is out of that grew City Innovations to where now we're not just focused on that one startup, right? We're focused on all these different startups that we're helping kind of bring to product market fit. And so taking all of those templates and all of those things that we learned through pain and like expanding them out to where we're using them across multiple different of our customers, now startups. So that's a little bit, maybe more than you wanted, but there's a little bit of background about City Innovations. So
no, I love it. I think that's a great segue into how you guys ended up starting City Innovations. So tell us a little bit about the makeup of the team for City Innovations today. How many companies do you guys have under your portfolio, and how do companies work with you guys typically? What does the arrangement look like? I think like that would be helpful for also our listeners too.
Yeah, so the makeup of the team is mostly entrepreneurs and residents. So it's folks like me, that we have a group of designers, but mostly product and I would say entrepreneurs and residents that are very focused on no code, low code solutions. Like I was articulating, with that SMS solution is that the danger of having these engineers up front is they'll just want to build everything. And so for us, we've really learned, don't do that. And so we've got engineers, but we kind of wait till the moment of we hit product market fit. Well, great. Now you can start. Sometimes you need low code solutions as well. So we have some engineers on staff as well. So the makeup is mostly like entrepreneurs and residents. We're still we're a relatively small team, and we want to keep it that way. Like it's intentional. So for us, we're about 15 people, and then on top of that we have triple that in 1099 full-time like consultants that come in. And a lot of those, what those look like is like, those are the developers. So those are the developers, those are the designers. Kind of the core team is really focused on an entrepreneur in residence per startup. And so that's really our capacity. If you're talking about our portfolio, we've got kind of probably about that 15 maximum, because we want to dedicate like an entrepreneur in residence per startup, really dedicated to that startup, because startups take so much time and energy. You can't just kind of half dedicate someone, right? So it's like for us, we want to fully dedicate someone on our team. So for us, we kind of have a limit, and we limited also how many startups we work with in a year. So we really limit that to about 4. So like one a quarter. We'll work with one new startup a quarter. We will run an accelerator program that's kind of invite only. And so we'll run cohort style through that. And then sometimes we'll use that as kind of almost an entrance to our program to say, first go through our accelerator program. And then we can start to get to know you a little bit better as a founder, and we can start to coach you a little bit. And then as we start to see things progress, we'll get more hands-on, so that's kind of our approach to how to get engaged. So we also offer a business builder program. It's funny you mentioned, like, you almost have to put them through like a boot camp. That's basically what it is. It's like, so it's a boot camp for entrepreneurs, and we make it pretty intense because building a startup is really intense, right? So it's, for us, that's a paid version of our accelerator, where we kind of have that open to everyone to say anyone that wants to join that can join that cohort style. So
got it. Interesting. Very cool. Very cool. And are you guys, where do you anticipate City Innovations to kind of be in the next like 4 or 5 years from now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us, I think for us, we want to keep the team still small. So for us, where we want to head is probably in the 40 to 50 range at a maximum, and start to really focus on different being able to kind of specialize into different verticals. Like we've got a couple of verticals we're starting to specialize in, specifically with other venture capital firms and other firms we're working with. So we're starting to get a lot more traction in certain verticals. And that's where I think we're going to start to double down on being more vertical driven. And then the other thing is we will have a more, right now we have a good capital network, and we're always trying to build that out more. And that what that capital network really does is we interact with a lot of startups every week. And so for us, it's real and hear a lot of pitches, good and bad. So, and we'll work with other people to kind of lead around and say, do you want to be involved in the pre-seed or the seed round? And so probably, definitely more partnerships in our capital network, because we're always open to meeting and partnering with new folks that want to change the world like we do, of trying to, if there's a startup that matches their criteria, and we work with them really closely on like, what are you looking for? What verticals, what criteria, when would you want to make the investment? And we work very closely to make introductions, post market fit, product market fit, product market fit. And we work closely with our investment arm which is comprised of a lot of different investors to really pair up startups with the right investor, because for us, that's extraordinarily important. So that network is continually being built out. So in the future, we view that as being built out as well. And we'll probably open a couple other locations, but that's a little bit of a snapshot of where we're headed. So
got it. Very cool. Well, on that note, I think we're rounding up on the hour here. So I think we can kind of wind things down a little bit. But it was super interesting to kind of hear your journey. I think like on a personal level, definitely a lot of things to kind of like pick through there. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners have a lot to pick through there. But it's very interesting to see how you ended up from KPMG and then having a buddy just kind of let you know, hey, I have a few $100K. Well, that's not enough. And now I got $1 million. And now all the way to today, obviously, I think like, if I look back on my entrepreneurial journey, it's been like that too, where it's kind of like a buddy or a couple of buddies of mine where it's like, hey, let's go do this thing. And, and those are kind of like those pivotal moments where I think like where I can sense from you and just for myself too, but like the path of life that you would go down would be very, very different had it not been for that individual or group of individuals, to be in your life, right? And it defines everything that you end up having for the most part, or where you end up today. So
yes, that's right.
Yeah, super interesting. And are you guys still working together now on City Innovations, or is this just kind of its own thing? And how's that partnership
It's
work?
its own thing. So my partner and I previous partner and I are still in touch, still good relationship. He's going off and doing other things. We've kind of parted ways, but no harm, no foul, no hard feelings. It was very amenable. And so I went off and did City Innovations, and he went off and did some other things as well. So
yeah.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking your time to join us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Chris.